Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com runs down the major markets. He tells us there was a little excitement after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that many of President Trump's tariffs were not valid. Ross checks out gold, silver, copper, uranium, the U.S. and Canadian dollars, and Bitcoin. Founder of 321gold.com, Bob Moriarty, weighs in on the gold and silver markets. He says while the price of the metals might have settled down, the companies that explore for them and produce them are still a bargain. He gives us his opinion on the Supreme Court tariff ruling on whether Canada should become the 51st state. Publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, Mark Leibovit, checks in from Arizona to give us his take on the tariff court ruling. He believes President Trump will find a way around it. Mark talks about gold, silver, Bitcoin, uranium, and AI. He's also excited the White House might finally release the real UFO and alien files. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com. Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com, where you'll find insightful market commentary and timely technical analysis. You can find him on X at Charts by Ross. Welcome back to This Week in Money.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
How would you describe what happened on the stock markets this week?
Well, this was a quieter week. We had a little bit of excitement at the tail end when the Supreme Court came out with the 6-3 decision. And with that, the markets that had been down a little bit on Thursday bounced back reasonably well. And the precious metals, good bounce there. U.S. dollar, bit of activity, but overall, it's a lot more of the same. We take a look at in the equity markets. The S&P and the NASDAQ are the heavy ones. NASDAQ being the heaviest of all. We're now flirting underneath the 20 and 50-day moving averages. And as far as the S&P is concerned, it's heavy too, under its moving averages. But if we look at the S&P with the unweighted basis, and we take a look at the mid caps or the Russell 2000, they are just continuing to steer stuff up. So it's that kind of a market, which really we started into at the tail end of November. And, I would think there's not too much longer in terms of this one. Overall, once the NASDAQ starts to really break here, it could pull a lot of the other equities down with it.
What's going on with gold?
Gold, we're in a consolidation mode. We have been for the better part now of, since we had that hard break off the all-time highs. And we had two good tests. I look at the initial break as getting down to the 30-day moving average. It did that on the initial break. We've had two retests of that, and a little bounce at the end of the week related to, I think, the U.S. dollar action and the Supreme Court. But, we are still, as far as gold concerned, we're just around $5,000. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see maybe get up around the 5250. But this is a consolidation phase. could last the better part maybe of another month or so. And we've been testing that 30-day moving average. I wouldn't be at all surprised that this consolidation would take this long, and we test the 50-day moving average. As far as that's concerned, if it holds, and then we start to break out on the upside through the 5250 level, I think we got a decent chance of testing the all-time highs again. Silver market has been weaker, not bouncing back as well. We're looking at the spot price around $84. This one not recovered percentage-wise as well as gold, and wouldn't be at all surprised to say that it consolidates as well, and maybe is down at $70 again. Wouldn't be at all a surprise for the consolidation. Of note, the miners have been bouncing much better. We take a look at the GDX or the SIL, which are the stocks related to the precious metals, and they've recovered a good 50% or more, and that would suggest that when this consolidation is done in terms of the metals, that things could look much better on the upside. Other than precious metals, the copper market has had a decent consolidation here. Did not break as badly as what we saw in the precious metals, and I would suggest that we've got some nice oversold readings in copper, down as low as 560 this week, bounced back to 586 by the end of the week. It looks as though it's got a chance to move considerably higher over time.
What's going on with uranium?
Uranium, the stocks gave up a fair amount here during this consolidation. Bounced back about a week ago. They looked clearly the breaks have been under control. The 50-day moving averages have held on virtually all of the stocks. So give it time, and this is a sector that has some pretty good potential. And, the storyline is always going to be there as far as the energy is concerned, and the need to get the uranium side of the equation going. And as far as the stocks are concerned, there, pick a group with one of the ETFs, and I think that's the way to go. In terms of the other side of the equation on energy, the energy stocks doing famously. We take a look at the indices, both on the U.S. and the Canadian side. They are stepping up very much day by day, and I would think that any 4 or 5 day correction there, you want to make sure that you're on board, because this sector is doing pretty darn well. And we've got crude oil itself holding in, and for the week, the crude oil market bounced pretty well. $66 is up nicely from the low down at 56 and change. We are into the seasonally favorable period. You might as well enjoy the run.
What's going on with the U.S. and Canadian dollars?
U.S. dollar bounced back reasonably well in the last week or so. We've been up around 97. This is up from 96.5 a week ago, and that real clean out low back at the end of January down at 96 and change. That first run up to resistance, which had been at 98, it was a good spot for it to pause. The 50-day moving average was resistance. It's backed off and tested it again. So this one probably goes back and gets up more around the 98.5 to 99 level. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the dollar index right now.
What's happening with Bitcoin?
That one had that big sell-off that the better part of a month ago, and gave us what we call downside capitulations. So that was around 60,000. Had a good bounce to 72,000, and now two retests of the support area. It looks as though it's trying to base, but I would suggest that the upper parameter for it is maybe up around 76,000 for now. So don't get too excited. It's probably a good short-term trade, but long-term, the potential is, I think, still more to the downside.
Ross, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Good to be with you, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com. Find him on X at Charts by Ross. Coming up, Bob Moriarty, next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back. My guest is Bob Moriarty, the founder of 321gold.com. He's a veteran of the mining industry. Bob, welcome to This Week in Money.
Well, it's a real pleasure.
Can you tell us about 321gold.com?
Okay, my wife and I saw silver and gold hitting a bottom 24 years ago, and there was very little in the space at the time. There was Gold Eagle and there was Kitco. So we decided it would be a good time to get into the information space about resource stocks, and we managed to pick the bottom.
President Trump is predicting 100,000 Dow before the end of his term. If President Trump was to ban all shorting, would that get the Dow on its way to 100,000 points?
I don't think so. And as a guy who's traded stocks for 40 years and was a commodities broker, actually shorting stocks is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. When somebody shorts stocks, it automatically turns them into a buyer. So a market is a lot healthier if it has shorting. Now, that's not the same thing as naked short selling, okay, which happens to be illegal and very bad. But shorting markets is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But Donald Trump thinks he's a lot of things, but I don't think he's a good predictor of the stock market. So if the stock market goes to 100,000, it's only going to be because we have hyperinflation.
Gold and silver just had great runs. Are these runs an indicator of good mining markets ahead?
Absolutely. And strange enough, you sent me that list yesterday, but did you see what gold and silver did today?
Tell us.
Okay. Gold's up $117 and silver's up almost $7. It's up 8.53%. That's a reaction to the Supreme Court ruling on Trump's tariffs. And frankly, the mining stocks have not even started their move. Gold is expensive, silver is expensive, but the companies that produce them or the companies who explore for them are not showing the moves like they're going to very soon. This is interesting because, this week is Chinese Lunar New Year, and the Chinese are off for an entire week, so there's going to be no trading in silver and gold in Shanghai until the 24th. I was looking for a correction this week because of Lunar New Year, and actually exactly the opposite has happened. The Supreme Court ruling on tariffs just threw a giant monkey wrench in Trump's plans.
Copper's having a good run. What does Dr. Copper see ahead for the world?
Dr. Copper is telling us hyperinflation is on the way. It's corrected a little bit, but it was up past $6, and that's a very healthy number. Copper is in short supply. Copper projects are very attractive right now, but a copper, gold, silver, platinum, palladium going so much higher is actually a very dangerous signal of precariousness in the world's economic situation.
Is President Trump's push for mining critical minerals likely to propel the junior mining markets higher?
100%. Absolutely. It cannot do anything but that. And I actually fully approve of that. If you go back to 1929, about 30% of the Dow was in mining stocks, and mining stocks now represent about 2% of the entire global stock market. So mining stocks are absurdly cheap. I fully approve of the government, one, reducing the paperwork and speeding the process up, and two, actually investing in critical metals.
Your thoughts on the junior mining sectors and which ones you're bullish and super bullish on?
All of them. Absolutely. Mining stocks. Okay, here's the deal. When you have a resource bull market, the first stocks to move are the majors, and then the mid-tiers, and then the juniors. Now, we have just barely started to move in the juniors, but across the entire field, uranium, copper, silver, gold, the mining stocks are simply absurdly cheap. Now, I've written a couple of financial books. They're available on Amazon.com. One of them was a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I advocate buying things when they're cheap and selling them when they're dear. Gold is expensive, silver is expensive, platinum is expensive, palladium is expensive, copper is expensive. However, the companies that produce those are the companies who are exploring for them are absurdly cheap.
Is government intervention all over the world causing metal prices to rise?
I don't think it's government intervention. I think it's central bank intervention. What the United States has done, when the United States and NATO and the EU literally stole $300 billion from the Russians, they sent a signal to everyone else in the world that their money was no longer safe if the United States decided they were bad guys. So the largest holder of treasury bonds in the world is Japan, followed by China. and they're selling them with both hands, and that's going to drive up the price of interest rates and reduce the price of bonds. And it's a dangerous thing for the U.S. economy, and it's something the United States started.
Currently, which countries are the most mining friendly?
This is going to surprise you. I happen to have some shares in the fifth largest silver company in the world, which is located in Bolivia. It's San Cristobal Mining. And Bolivia has turned, when I was a kid, and I'm 79 now, when I was a child, if you wanted to know the leading mining country in the world, everyone would say Bolivia, but then they turned leftist, and the government took over mining, and everything stopped. Well, the government has woken up in Bolivia. They have a businessman as the president of Bolivia, and he's come out and said, look, we want investment in Bolivia. We want to raise the standard of living of Bolivians, and we want to encourage mining. And that's exactly what he's doing. But that's the friendliest country in terms of how they've changed. But frankly, Canada is always going to be right up on the top of the list. Canada has some extremely friendly provinces like Quebec, and Canada is relatively safe from an economic point of view, and obviously over-endowed with minerals.
Is AI technology having an effect on the mining industry?
I think it's a minor effect. I'm not a big fan of AI. AI is a really bad name in the same way that rare earth elements is a bad name. Rare earth elements are not rare. They're very common. It's just unusual for them to be rich enough to actually produce economically. Likewise, artificial intelligence is not intelligence, it's pattern recognition. Now, in some cases, like medicine, reading x-rays, pattern recognition is absolutely mandatory and brilliant, but there's a lot of things that it's not necessarily good for. It's been oversold. It's in a bubble. The bubble is starting to crash, and investments in AI are going to go down significantly over the next 6 months to a year. That said, there are some advantages to it. We just don't know how we can make those advantages economic.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
It's a fraud.
Simple as that.
Well, Bitcoin is an electronic beanie baby. It's one of 17,000 variations of random number generation. It's a entirely like 98 or 99% speculation and 1 or 2% actual utility. People buy Bitcoin not because it does something. They buy Bitcoin because it's gone up in the past. That said, Bitcoin has gone from a total market cap of $4 trillion 6 months ago to $2 trillion today. So yes, a lot of people made a lot of money, but it's a speculation. And what none of these people are willing to tell you is a lot of people have lost a lot of money.
Is real estate in Canada and the U.S. in trouble?
Yes. Okay. I mean, that's so easy. I don't know what the number is for Canada, but in the United States, 85% of Americans cannot afford the average house. Now, one of two things has to happen if we're going to put these people in houses. Either their income has to go up substantially or the real estate prices have to go down. Real estate's in a bubble in the United States, and it's a bubble in Canada. It's correcting now, and it's going to go a lot lower.
President Trump is bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. Is the U.S. dollar likely to remain strong?
President Trump would like to, but that is a 30-year venture, and I don't think he's going to be around that long. I know damn well I'm not going to be around that long. We gave manufacturing away to India and to China and to Mexico, and it's going to take a long time to recreate manufacturing in the United States because our costs are just too high in the United States. I mean, this infringes a little bit on Trump's plan to get rid of all the illegals. A lot of those people were taking the jobs that Americans didn't want. We need manufacturing. There's only three ways to create wealth. You can mine it, you can manufacture it, or you can grow it. And we gave our manufacturing capability away. A third of U.S. production or a third of the U.S. economy is actually shuffling pieces of paper. And that's no more economy than some tiny Arizona town with a massage parlor and an Indian casino. That's not an economy. To have a real economy, you've got to have manufacturing, and we're going to have to learn how to compete because the people that we're competing against, like Vietnam, like China, like Japan, like Mexico, are very effective now. So we're going to have to relearn manufacturing, but it's not going to happen in Trump's lifetime.
Currently, China is celebrating the Fire Horse New Year. China, through infiltration, is attempting to be the next superpower. Could the year of the Fire Horse work in their favor or against them?
Absolutely work in their favor. I have a lot of respect for the Chinese. I've been over there half a dozen times. They're incredible people. Do they cheat? Yeah, of course they do. We do the same thing. Big deal. We need to learn how to cooperate with China. Instead, we're trying to make China the enemy. The attack on Venezuela and the kidnapping of Maduro was not an attack on Venezuela. It was an attack on China. The attack on Cuba is an attack on China. The attack on Iran is an attack on China. And quite bluntly, I don't think that's how you make friends. China should not be an adversary. They should be a competitor, but on equal terms. But China's not the enemy.
The World Economic Forum and the CCP have been infiltrating the West. What would likely happen if President Trump designated the WEF and the CCP international terrorist organizations?
I wish, and I would totally support him declaring the World Economic Forum a terrorist organization for only one reason. It is a terrorist organization. The Chinese Communist Party, I ignore that totally. And I ignore it because I was in Vietnam. I spent 20 months at war in 1968 through 1970. I never felt the Vietnamese were our enemy. We were at war from 1954 until 1975. We clearly lost the war. The dirty, rotten commies won the war, but actually they're some of our best friends now. I think that calling the CCP a terrorist organization would be counterproductive, and I would be against it. But the World Economic Forum truly is an economic terrorist.
For North American security, should President Trump annex Canada and make it the 51st state?
That's one of the most insulting things I have ever heard an American president do. I love Canadians, okay? Canadians are exactly like Americans, except they're sane. And I have a lot of admiration for Canada. I'm not a big fan of the government in Canada, but I'm not a big fan of the government anywhere. But making Canada the 51st state is absurd because it suggests that the United States is somehow superior just because it's the United States. I do not believe that. And talking about making Greenland the 52nd state is almost even more absurd.
What are your thoughts on President Trump's second term?
Strange enough, given the fact that he was running against Kamala Harris, I was 100% in favor of his election. I fully approve of the United States not fighting stupid wars. I fully approve of getting rid of the illegal immigrants who were brought in under the Biden administration. I fully approve of reducing government spending. The unfortunate thing is that in almost every case, Donald Trump has done exactly the opposite. He's talking about raising the defense budget from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. And quite bluntly, the only enemies the United States has are enemies the United States has created. And I'm actually against that. It's a guy that spent some time at war. I'm very anti-war, and I do not support it whatsoever. And I'm against that. And so we're fighting all these silly wars now. We're increasing the defense budget. We're not reducing government expenses. And I think ICE is actually getting rid of people that we need for our economy. The underground economy in the United States has really existed for probably the last 60 or 80 years, and they do the jobs that Americans don't want. Now, I think the Biden administration brought in 10 million or 12 million or 15 million people who have no desire whatsoever to be Americans, no desire whatsoever to assimilate, but the Biden administration wanted to bring people in, feed them, clothe them, give them cell phones, give them $1,200 a month on credit cards so they could be Democratic voters. And those are not the kind of immigrants that we need.
From the outside looking in, what are your thoughts on Canada?
I love Canada. I think Canada is absolutely wonderful. I think Trudeau's a blithering idiot. I think that Carney is not much better. But Canadians are literally exactly like Americans. They just happen to be sane.
What are you hearing on the Epstein files?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I'll tell you what I'm not hearing. I'm not hearing 98% of the Epstein files. And as a guy who is in combat, I'll tell you, the targets that are most heavily defended are the targets that you want to hit. The fact that Trump administration is fighting tooth and nail to keep the Epstein files being released is exactly the reason we need the Epstein files released. I think that if they did release them and they were redacted, I think there would be a revolution tomorrow. What I have seen in the 2% that has been released is that we've got a lot of very evil people running our society.
What are your thoughts on the safest places to live?
My wife and I faced exactly that issue. I am a contemporary of Donald Trump, and I'm a contemporary of George Bush, the shrub. We are all born within 6 weeks of each other. And when George Bush was president, my wife and I were living in Miami. We said, the United States is going on the wrong path, and it's doing things that are going to be dangerous eventually. We need to move. So we moved to Grand Cayman, and we lived in Grand Cayman for half a dozen years. And then we realized, wait a minute, all of the food that comes to Grand Cayman comes through Miami. So if the United States does something really stupid, like start World War III, and of course World War III might start next week, we need to live someplace safer. My wife was British. We came to Europe. I live in a small farming community. There's no drugs. There's very little crime. There's no immigration issue whatsoever. The government's no more insane than any other government in Europe. And we're quite happy to live here because we think it's safe should really bad things happen. But I as a guy who spent a lot of time in combat, we are closer to annihilation than we have ever been in my lifetime, and most people are blissfully unaware of it.
Where can our listeners follow your work?
2 different places. The website, of course, is free. I've got 2 websites, 321Gold and 321 Energy. It's a free website. We don't spam people. We don't collect information at all. And we've had several hundred writers write for us, and I do a lot of writing, and we try to offer a variation of information about resources in the economy. And I've written about 10 books, and if you go to Amazon, I've written nonfiction, I've written fiction, I've written an autobiography, I've written about taking small airplanes all over the world. I've written about being in the military for 6 years. And I am not the greatest writer in the world, but I have a very broad reach. I can write about a lot of different things. I think I have 3 books that made the bestseller list. And between the website and between the books on Amazon, people can get a pretty good idea of what I'm about.
Bob, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Well, you picked a really great time. We literally had a sea change in gold and silver today, and next week's going to be very interesting. It was a good time to be talking to you, and I appreciate the invitation.
My guest has been Bob Moriarty, founder of 321Gold.com. Our conversation took place on Friday, February 20th. Coming up, Mark Leibovit, next on This Week in Money.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to This Week in Money.
Glad to be here, Jim.
Mark, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump on most things were not constitutional. Is that going to put an end to the president imposing tariffs?
Well, apparently not, according to Donald Trump's, post decision presentation. So basically, he said that, in so many words, he was deeply disappointed and ashamed a little bit about the court, and they're unpatriotic and disloyal and so forth. He praised Justice Kavanaugh, which is one of the conservative members of the court. But he said there's some very powerful alternatives to emergency powers, and he's going to impose a global 10% tariff under a different statute, which he refers to as Section 122 of the Trade Act, that allows short-term tariffs to trade up to 150 days. He also intends to use other trade authorities such as Section 301, which addresses unfair trade practices, to continue his agenda on the ruling. And, they were prepared for this. I mean, his attorneys knew that the court might have a political bias. And, the Chief Justice, read the result, and he's not very pro-Trump anyway. Meanwhile, the stock market was up a couple hundred points. There may be some refunds, but there's offsets, and there's some deals that have already been struck that I don't think this ruling is going to change. And, we have a creative team, and, they make America great statement is really what's behind all this. He still feels, despite potential political risk, people say, why fool around with the midterm elections coming up in November, and so forth. But he feels like this is really best for America and for the U.S., so he's going to figure it out. And, for the most part, the economy has been doing okay. I know people are complaining about a lot of things, but, market indexes went to new record highs, even though it may be a short-term bull trap for the Dow, which I mentioned in last week's interview when it reached 50,000. Still, it's way the heck up there. And if the tariffs and the whole strategy was all so bad, which was announced last April of last year, I don't think the markets would have done as well. So, companies are adjusting to it. The world is sort of adjusting to a new administration, a new policy for the U.S., and they're just going to have to deal with it. So, unfortunately, you have, the Democrats in this country, or I know there's a right to have two sides to any argument, but they're so dysfunctional in terms of their Trump hatred and so forth. It really shows the insanity which unfortunately plagues the entire political party. And I know we're not supposed to get into political comments, but it's clearly that we have a lot of insane Democrats out there doing a lot of stupid things and saying a lot of stupid things, like encouraging illegal immigrants in this country or criminals over U.S. citizens, and we can run down the whole political spectrum here of things that have been going on. And we have just it's not pro-U.S. or not pro-country. It's like anything to bring down Trump or anything they can say, which is not the will of the people. I mean, the majority of the people in this country voted for Trump, and every state went for them on the ballots and so forth. So on, it's not. It just, the media, unfortunately, is totally being manipulated and being prejudiced by this. This Trump hatred, and in fact, what's his name on the ABC network? One of the leading commentators was just cited by the Federal Communications Commission for acting improperly and biases against Trump, and trying to raise money for a political opponent. And the Federal Communications Commission here is going to come down on some of the media, which is long overdue, because it's really not balanced reporting. Years ago, when you had a Walter Cronkite or someone like that sitting at CBS, you thought at least you were getting some balanced reporting, and now it's totally imbalanced, and you have to go to other networks like Newsmax and so forth to get some of the real story, or Fox News maybe to a certain extent. But I've been in the media for decades. I mean, I've been interviewed on all the major networks, going back 45 years, from CBS radio to TV to CNBC to CNN, and I've been all over, and I've met a lot of the reporters, and many of the leading names you see on TV I've met personally over the years, and it's clear that they've been influenced and biased, and not the same reporters that they used to be when I first met them. They're pressured to follow the quote-unquote woke mentality, and this diversity nonsense, and they're just over the top. So unfortunately, you see it in the financial reporting, you see it in the the social reporting, and I know we're getting off a little bit of a tangent, but the 6-3 ruling really was not fair compared to the facts at hand. And I think if you had not a anti-Trump bias, you would have seen it pass and it would have gone through. So that's just my own personal opinion. But regardless, the country is doing fine. A lot of the reporting about things not going so well is not really the case. If you're not trained for a job, you have to get trained for a job. So you have no excuse if you have to learn AI, or you have to learn the technology to get into the swing of things. There's training out there to do it. There's courses I'm being sent every day if I want to take them, to learn about AI and all that kind of stuff, or programming, or blockchain, or whatever you need to learn to stay in the groove of what's really happening out there. And besides that, there's so many blue collar jobs out there that many of the young people don't want to take. Mike Rowe, the famous commentator you see on Fox News, he had that program and still does. I think it used to be called Dirty Jobs, and I think they have a new name for it now. And there's so many blue collar industrial jobs out there that pay really well, that really are really needed to run the country, or both countries, Canada and the U.S. There's work out there that pays very well, handling and in manufacturing and heavy equipment and all kinds of industries, both on the use side and manufacturing side. And, when AI comes along, people are worrying about losing their job or things, not be able to find work. Well, if your house has to be repaired, or if you have plumbing or electrical issues, or you have a construction project, AI is not going to do that for you. It's real people with real training, and that training is available to people out there. So, I think, it's just a question of individuals getting motivated to train and do what they need to do, and hopefully they can find something they enjoy. And so many of these other jobs, you're not sitting behind a desk, you're out in the fresh air, or you're doing stuff, that's really exciting. You could be in real estate, you can be in construction, manufacturing, all kinds of fun stuff. I know, electrical work and plumbing work sounds, not very appealing, but some of the money that's made is really significant. And, I have a very good friend who's a car salesman who runs a dealership here in Phoenix. And the guy, I didn't want to mention numbers, but huge numbers they make. People joke for years, I don't want to be a car salesman, or I don't want to be in the car industry. Well, some of the money some of these guys are making is extraordinary. So there's plenty of opportunity and money out there. And, so the complaints about the economy, I think are ridiculous. It's just a question of getting trained and putting your mind to it. And, markets, I think, and the soundness of the economy is still, I think, very much there. And, you don't see equity markets, at new all-time highs, or as high as they've been. I mean, the commentators, all these so-called Nobel economists and prognosticators in the last year or two have all been negative about what's going to happen to the economy and so forth, and it just has not happened. So even though, I'm looking at the charts, and there's some room for a correction in the markets, and we're going to get these at any time, that's part and parcel of the, the market game, but I still think the numbers say, we're in good shape. The exception, of course, would be some unpredictable black swan event. And the only thing, one of the only things we see out there now is the risk of war, what's going to happen with Iran. And, of course, there's still some unsettling, in Israel and so forth. And, we still have Ukraine to be dealt with. But I think we're all coming to terms with that. I think these are going to be resolved. So, whether Iran gets blown up in the meantime, or whether we have a peaceful solution, which, frankly, I wouldn't trust. I don't trust the Iranians at all, and I think we're foolish to trust them. But, that may be a possibility, even though I disagree with it personally. In any event, the Trump decision today was really the big story, because we've been waiting for this. It took, when you think about it, look at all the months it took the Supreme Court to make this decision. I mean, it was about 8 months or 9 months that they've been sitting on this. I mean, this is something that should have been resolved within, in my opinion, 24 hours. I think they requested an emergency ruling from the Supreme Court, and it took them all this time. So obviously there were some political factors here. And, Trump is not the only U.S. president to impose tariffs. They go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln in this country. Roosevelt had it. I think Wilson had it. There's Harding had it. I think a lot of other presidents have imposed it. And, you could argue, well, there was no specific congressional action for this, but, you got a commander-in-chief, and if he thinks there's national security involved or so forth, I think he should have the power to impose tariffs. And, so I think it's all going to end up that Trump will win at the end, and I think maybe the fact the markets were up today and didn't so-called crash or see any extreme moves, I think is a positive sign. So I remain overall bullish, but in terms of short to near term, there's some cyclical patterns here into March that I've talked about, then maybe we'll get a little shakeout. But outside of that, I'm sort of happy with the result today.
What's going on with gold?
Starting to bounce back here a little bit. Got up to about 5,200 today in U.S. dollars. Silver moving back to the high 80s. The trend is your friend here. I still think the charts say there's some downside risk, in the markets. It's very tough to call the short-term swings, but, I think, the bull is out of the gate, so to speak. We crossed through major resistance in silver. And I think, the trend is your friend overall. You're just going to have to withstand some of the volatility that could possibly exist out there. I mean, silver could pull back to $50, but doesn't mean it can't ultimately be 150, or maybe it's going to go to 150 first and then go back to 50. Just a very wild market. But I think a lot of people, just are brainwashed to believe that you've got to own a bunch of silver and gold. Even Bitcoin is upticking here a little bit today, which surprised some people. But I don't know if we're out of the woods there completely or not. But the gold and silver market are still in overall bull trends. And, you have to decide, are you trading them or investing? And if you've been an investor, you have done very well in both markets. And they've had some wild swings. And, we try to trade them a little bit here too. But, my basic advice is, if you're in for as many years as I've been and many other people have been, just hang in there. So, if you're trading, that's another story. You got some really wild swings here to take advantage of. So if gold decides to correct and have a shakeout, it could get down to the 4,400 area if there's some technical breakdown, and there's even risk on the charts even as low as 3,500 if you read the charts. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you just look at support levels and you have to deal with them if they are broken. I'm not saying they will, but I can see them on the charts. By the same token, gold could be 10,000 in 2 or 3 years too. So silver, same story. It broke out, went to 120. Pulled back to 65, 70, which was a nice correction. Maybe that was enough. I would have liked to have seen 50, but maybe you saw the bottom there. So again, are you trading or are you investing? And I think the demand for metals and the need for them on an industrial basis and on a technological basis, I think supports this, the strong trend for the commodities, and metals being one of them. Of course, we're also talking about copper and platinum, palladium, lithium, uranium, and the whole sector. I don't think anything's changed there. I just think you're running through little corrective periods along the way. So I guess at some point there's going to be some black swan event, something that we can't predict, which suddenly could change things, or and there could be a shakeout. We see these all the time. I mean, look at the shakeout we had on Liberation Day in April of last year in the stock market when Donald Trump announced the tariffs, and it was like a 4 or 5 day event, and then it ended up bouncing back. So there's always that risk that something comes out of the blue that we don't expect, and that's just the nature of the market. So I'm still thinking, I like to see an S&P pull back, but the trend I just still think is overall higher. I'm sort of betting we'll still get type of pullback into March, but let's see how it plays out.
What's going on with Bitcoin?
Well, it's starting to, there's a little technical formation on the chart. You had for those who may know a little bit about technical chart reading, we have like a little bull flag formation on the charts in Bitcoin. So it broke down big, and then it's got a little sideways to upward bias right now, and it's trying to correct the big down move. So to bring us up to speed here, we went from 126,000 basically to 60,000, and that's one heck of a correction. And we joked about this for years, Jim, when we talk about this, right? The volatility in Bitcoin, and if you look at the charts and see the huge corrections that it's had in the last 12, 15 years. This is not out of the question of normality. So you had almost like a 50% correction in Bitcoin, and now everybody's pretty bearish on it. We talked about the rumor out there that with high technology and advanced programming and AI and everything that's out there, maybe the code to Bitcoin could possibly be broken, which would obviously destroy the coin. And we talked about this weeks and weeks ago, and now I hear it in the financial commentary as a risk, and I wonder how true that really is. I suppose if they break the code on Bitcoin. Now, this doesn't kill the crypto market. There's so many other cryptos out there that have practical purposes. You've got congressional action here in the U.S. legitimatizing the crypto market. The Clarity Act is supposed to be passed hopefully pretty soon by April. There's a lot of, international focus on the use of the crypto for business purposes, for exchange of, transactions and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the crypto market unrelated to what Bitcoin does, though obviously if the code to Bitcoin is broken and the thing explodes and goes to zero, psychologically that would be a big negative, that everybody would have to deal with. But, I'm not telling you to go out there and pay $60,000 for Bitcoin or $120,000 for Bitcoin. You trade it, or you diversify, and you look at other cryptos. We do a blockchain letter. We cover, many of the other cryptos that are out there, and we call the letter the blockchain letter. And there's a strong future for the crypto market, regardless of Bitcoin. But just going back to my first comment, got off a little bit on the tangent. So you have a little bull flag formation there now, got down to 60. It could rally potentially back to 70 or 80 and still be in a downtrend and break at some later point. You don't know. So we just have to watch the charts here. So my bias is I'm bullish. Overall, if we take out the 60, I suppose you can get 30 or 40,000 in Bitcoin, which is sort of a crazy number, but I guess you could see it happen based on previous volatility, and then we'll take it from there. But it may have a little bit of a recovery here, or we may have seen the big bottom. We just got to watch the chart. So I'm actually long it in terms of a ETF that plays Bitcoin here, thinking we at least can get a little bit of a rebound or relief rally to the upside. So we'll see how it plays out.
What's going on with the U.S. dollar?
Oh, everybody's talking about the dollar, going to hell in a handbasket. I'm not so much that in that case, but it has been weak. I'm sort of neutral on the dollar. I don't have any strong opinion for it. The charts say it's weak, which is good for the metals or commodities in general because they're priced in U.S. dollars and they work inversely, as you know. But I've seen over the years that you could see dollar go one way along with the commodities. Sometimes they're in sync. Sometimes they don't actually work inversely. So I don't want to get caught in the inverse relationship as being, the predominant theme here. The conventional view is the dollar is going to go the way of the dodo and it's going to go to zero and we're not going to have a dollar anymore. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen. So I watch the charts. I see it's relatively weak, but I'm neutral. I'm not taking any positions, and I'm watching the other markets. What are the commodity markets doing, the stock market's doing, and I'm just sort of don't have much thought about the dollar.
What's going on with uranium?
Still very much in favor. We had a little correction in some of the uranium stocks, the ETF, Cameco, which is of course the big company, Canadian company, which owns a big part of Westinghouse, and still a big player in the future for uranium. You just have to keep in mind that many of the uranium and nuclear projects are not going to be all completed for a couple, 3 years or more. But in the meantime, a lot of money is being put into it. The government is behind it. The U.S. government, that is, behind rare earths and all kinds of critical metals and so forth that need to advance the technology. So, look at all the money that Microsoft and the big companies have put into, even NVIDIA, into the uranium business directly or indirectly, in terms of the generators and the power stations and so forth for AI computing. Takes time to build all these things. In the meantime, we may see natural gas as an alternative fuel source because of the time lag in getting these data centers and so forth up and running. But, with nuclear plants being built and the proposed ones being built, you got to remain a bull. I mean, for decades, it's been just the opposite. Anti-nuclear, anti-uranium, and the trends change. So the trend is your friend here. It's like anything else. It's going to trade up and down, and the trend I still think is very positive. But you got to take a couple-year perspective. You can't be thinking every day it's going to be up. So that's just the nature of the beast.
Is the huge drive to AI just another version of the dot-com bust back in 2000?
I don't think so. I originally felt that way, when it first started, because you start saying, well, is this another dot-com situation? Is it just going to burst? I think what may have happened here and is happening is that companies have spent a lot of money, and the market is starting to realize that the results of that money being spent aren't going to be seen on the bottom line so fast. So some of the big stocks in that had pulled back. Microsoft, for example, being one of them. Just after even putting a lot of money into nuclear and so forth. So the anticipation has driven a lot of the stocks higher. Billions and billions are being put into it, and the results may be, a few years away. So the stocks have started to back off a little bit, and I think you'll possibly see more of a correction because everybody got so exuberant about it and got carried away. I mean, if you look at the charts, you'll see these stocks just like straight up, not parabolic, but, pretty significant moves over the last, 12 months or so. So, that's one of the reasons why the NASDAQ has underperformed here a little bit. And even though the Dow Industrials went to new highs, you can see other indices not doing as well because a lot of those were weighted with the big name stocks that had all these AI investments and so forth, and they were weighting heavily in the averages and the indexes. So they start to pull back. So that put a little pressure on the market. So other stocks, other, blue chip type names out there have sort of filled the gap here a little bit, more common names like a Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble or a General Mills and, things that are more household type names, have come to life a little bit because money was looking for a place to go after seeing some of these big name AI stocks starting to pull back. I just think that, they got ahead of themselves, and as time moves forward, I mean, some serious money is being committed here to this, to the data centers and to the AI. Until they're up and running and we still really see all the results, which may be a couple years away, we can't really say, oh, it was a dot-com bust and it was all nonsense. I think there's much more to this, and whether it's good or bad, that's a whole other sociological or financial decision. Is all the money being put into AI and the results we hope to get really worth it too? We talked about this earlier. Jobs are going to be lost, maybe not, or there'll be new jobs created because of it. Time will tell. I'm not leading to the dot-com bust, but I am seeing the correction in some of the big stocks that got way ahead of themselves.
Anything happening on the cannabis front?
Not much. We had a little pop yesterday, a little bit, and they pulled back today. If you looked at the screen yesterday, you saw a little cannabis stock starting to rally a little bit. They're still waiting for the, the rescheduling to occur. So it still hasn't happened, even though Donald Trump issued an executive order directing that it would happen. So that the rescheduling from level 1 to level 3 on cannabis still hasn't officially happened. And we need so much more done than just that. But many of these small companies are still making money, and we need to get the Banking Act cleared up so many of these companies can do business in all 50 U.S. states where override the federal law, which is now negative. It has to be reversed. So, I don't know. I mean, there's trades there, and it'll ultimately be resolved. And I'm bullish because, we have administration here, the U.S. government finally getting behind the reality that we need to straighten out the laws with cannabis, that unlike prohibition or like prohibition back in the 1920s. You can't restrict people from using something they want to use. It's legal in Canada, as you know. It should be legal down here across the board. And you just have to set guidelines, You have to be 21 to buy liquor, so you have to be 21 to buy cannabis. You're not going to stop people from these so-called vices, but even though I'm saying vice, there's so many positive medical applications to it, and so many doctors have gone behind it. If you watch the presentation in the White House, it's on video. I have it ahead of my website. I don't know if I still have it there in every newsletter, but the day that he made that announcement trying to order the rescheduling from 1 to 3, if you saw the doctors making statements about the positive effects of cannabis and its usefulness, you really realize that there is a lot of medical reasons for it to be used and is being used by people all over the country and the world. So it's like anything else. Anything can be misused, but I think the overall view is it should be resolved positively. It may take more time. It has taken more time than it should have. And, I still follow all the little cannabis stocks and companies that are related to that field. I still think there's a lot of future there. And now, because of the president's edict about getting it rescheduled, some serious research can now go into that area, which really hasn't happened up to this point. So now we get some real serious investigation about the positive and or negative effects, and instead of relying only on anecdotal statements. So I think the future is bright. So I'm an optimist. But if you're trading the stocks, you got to realize they are volatile, but mostly very depressed. So when things are usually this depressed and people are negative, there's usually opportunity. So I think keeping a core position in a couple of the ETFs in the cannabis sector makes sense.
On the geocosmic front, President Trump says he's going to release the files on UFOs and aliens after former President Obama said there are aliens.
Oh, well, we're going to get started on one of my favorite subjects, right? Well, I don't believe we're going to get all the release that Donald Trump ordered. Even before Obama left the administration, his administration, if you remember, he released a bunch of stuff on UFOs. And then when it came out, so much of it was they were redacted pages. They were all blacked out. You couldn't read everything, even though thousands or millions of pages were released even after his administration. You couldn't read all the details. So I wonder if they're going to release it. It's going to be whited out or blacked out on the sheets. And then you're assuming that the Pentagon is legitimate in revealing all that they know, and there's so much of it is kept secret from the higher up, so to speak. It's sort of a whole secret operation, unfortunately, with regard to our research into the UFO phenomenon for decades. That I think too many heads are rolling. There's too much at stake for them to come out with the truth. I think that's the reason why so many years have gone by and we're not hearing it. And what's also happened is a lot of the research and work being done is being done by private industry, and it's not in the hands of the government anymore. So you can release all the U.S. government files, but most of the activity and research, if you want to believe that alien craft are being reverse engineered and all that stuff going on, it's being done in private industry, not in the hands of the government itself. So you can't get your hands on all that information, even if they release this other stuff that they're talking about. So I don't know if we're ever going to see the truth, because there's so much to it, and the power behind it, the research and the technology that's really behind all this is so significant that I don't know if they want to release it all. It may be too earth changing. In other words, if we have the ability to fly from pole to pole, from South Pole to the North Pole in 60 minutes, which is what some claim some of these craft are able to do, that far exceeds any technology that we are being told about. And that would, change the world in a way that may not be beneficial to the powers that be. So I've been following this for decades, and it's being controlled. And I don't know how much truth we're really going to get, no matter what documents are released. So if the secrets or the technology is that powerful, it's being controlled and kept in the hands of the most powerful people. And I don't think the man on the street will be allowed to use it, at least in our lifetime. I think that's really the problem here. But, what Obama came out and said, Jimmy Carter said he saw an alien craft. Ronald Reagan had an experience. There's a whole video on the Newsmax television network about UFOs and U.S. presidents. If you could ever watch that, they play it occasionally, and it goes through the whole history, even going back to Teddy Roosevelt, about apparently U.S. presidents' experience with extraterrestrials or alien craft or UFOs or however you want to define it. So, there's a whole history there. It's very interesting to watch. It's not really widely discussed, and as soon as a U.S. president says anything about it, he's immediately scoffed at or looked at as crazy or eccentric. Ronald Reagan made this interesting presentation in the United Nations. It was in the 1980s, and I've seen the video of it several times. But he made a comment, something to the entire United Nations, saying in so many words, what if the Earth was confronted by an alien force? Would that be enough for us all to get together and join, as a unified world? And he made that statement in so many words, saying, yes, there's powers out there, and are we going to be able to stick together to deal with them when they finally, expose themselves or reveal themselves? So I think it was in the late 80s he made that UN presentation, and you can pull it up on the internet. So I don't think statements like this are made just to be amusing. There's just stuff that they're not going to let us know about, Jim. We're not told everything, and I think they're going to try to control it as long as they can. And, I think Donald Trump or Obama are just trying to, be a little open about it, or relieve the pressure a little bit by saying, hey, we're going to show you what we have, but I don't think we're going to get the full truth. So anyway, that's sort of my response to it. I'm not giving up at it, but I think the secrets and the stuff that's involved here is so important or so powerful that you really can't release them all. They're just too powerful, too much power of information. And so we'll see. But apparently we have visitors from other worlds have been here, and those, including even Dwight Eisenhower, supposedly had an encounter with them, when he was president back in the 1950s. There's a whole article and actually videos about his meeting with, apparently, or making some type of contract with some alien civilization or something going way back at that time. And so all these papers that I've read and seen on the internet, and whether they're all true or not. So the U.S. president involvement is really interesting. I'm glad you brought up the Obama story, because it's not only related to him. It's like every U.S. president has had some experience, and I guess we're fortunate that they've been open enough to actually bring it up in a conversation. So anyway, let's see what happens. It's a fun subject, and it's been obviously the subject of so many movies and so many conversations over the years. So there's got to be truth to it. It's just a question of what part of the truth we're going to get.
All I can think of is that scene from A Few Good Men and Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth.
And I think that's the problem.
I think we can. I think we can.
I think we can too. I think there's some study, or poll that was done, like 70% of citizens believe in the existence of extraterrestrials or UFOs. Most people believe it, though they haven't actually seen it. I guess people are worried that if they actually see something, that it would frighten them to some extraordinary degree. But I don't want to get into too much detail about it, who they are and whatever, because I got decades of research here on my desk that I've read about, and who they are and where they come from and what we've done with them and not done with them, and you don't know what's true and what's not true. But usually there's a seed of truth to this somewhere, and that's what we're trying to get to.
Well, I saw a documentary that said gold comes from supernova explosions. So look at that. Our value on Earth comes from way out in outer space.
That's true. And they say so many asteroids are just laden with all these precious metals, including gold. And once we get to them or can mine them, we're going to have infinite sources of all the rare earths and metals that we can't find here on Earth. So they're all going to mine this stuff from the asteroids, and we're not going to have any critical minerals and rare earth issues and depend on China if we can just pull them off a couple of these asteroids and bring them back to Earth, which that's coming. And they may have already started. This company's already talking about mining the asteroids. I've read several articles and seen some interviews. So our answer is in the outside the Earth, and that's one of the reasons, I suppose, why Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, and he's talking about bases on the moon and all kinds of stuff. There's so much out there that, and there's a lot of theory that all the life on Earth came from everywhere else anyway. The asteroids or the meteorites crashing on the Earth had biological components that could have seeded the planet to begin with. So everything that's on Earth probably came from other planets and other solar systems anyway. So we're part of the universe.
Mark, thank you for chatting with us.
Thanks for allowing me to have this broad discussion. Take care.
Yes, from tariffs to extraterrestrials.
Right. Maybe that should be the headline, from tariffs to extraterrestrials. That sounds like a good one.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRtrader.com. He was speaking to us from Arizona. And that wraps up our show for this week. We'd like to thank our guests, Ross Clark, Bob Moriarty, and Mark Leibovit. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions for the show or for any of our guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. We'll be back next week with more This Week in Money.
Comments made on This Week in Money are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. This Week in Money is a production of House Street Media Incorporated. Executive producer is Tom Allen.